I'm Haley Resendez, and this is my primary source kit um, about crime and deviance. I teach sociology, which is not a history-based course, so I tried to do my project on something that was relevant to what I actually teach. So it might be a little bit different than everyone else's projects. The standards for sociology that relate to this topic, the main standard is 12C3, which is analyze human behavior in terms of conformity and deviance. And then there's three clarifying objectives that also talk about deviance in our society. This is a pretty huge topic in sociology. So first of all, what is deviance? It's basically just anytime you're going against a norm of society. These are just three different definitions I pulled off the internet. And I included the two pictures there to just emphasize the fact that deviance, we usually think of it as something really bad, like a crime, but it can be something just as simple as picking your nose, because it's anytime you're doing something that you're not expected to do or not supposed to do. The essential questions that I have for this particular study are, why do people conform or deviate from mainstream society? So we have people that choose to conform and people that choose to deviate, and why, what makes people come to that decision. And then how are social class and deviance interconnected? So trying to figure out if there is any sort of relationship between your social class and your likelihood of participating in deviant behavior. The first primary source that I picked out is called The Myth of Social Class and Criminality Reconsidered. I provided the link to the article here. I actually had to register for an account in order to view it, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to get to the whole thing, but that is that's how I was able to read it. And then I have the three interventions for this source. So before the students read it, they would identify the document, and then they have the everybody reads to find out and everybody reads to figure out questions in order to establish purpose for the reading. During reading for this article, I wanted them to have two different highlighters, and I wanted to use the highlighters to kind of pick out the two different perspectives that are brought up. So one highlighter would be used for evidence that suggests that lower class individuals commit more crime, and then the other highlighter would be used for evidence that suggests that there is no significant correlation between social class and crime, and both sides are presented in the article based on the research that was done. After reading, I want the students to answer these questions, describe the relationship that the research suggested, discuss flaws in the studies. I wanted to know their opinion. Do they think that there is a class crime relationship based on the evidence here? And I wanted them to talk about the conflict theory of deviance and how that supports or contradicts this study that they read. So they would answer these questions individually, then move into small groups, kind of go over the questions again, hopefully learn some things that they hadn't thought of from the people in their groups, and then come back for a whole group discussion where we'll talk about their ideas and the questions that they came up with in their groups. The second source is called Social Structure and Anatomy by Robert K. Merton's one of the main theorists that we discuss when we study deviance because of his strain theory that he came up with to explain why people are deviant. So Merton is a familiar name for the students, and there's a link to the article. The before reading would be the same, identify the document procedure, followed by several, everybody reads to find out, and everybody reads to figure out questions. So they want to know some basic info about the Merton's ideas, and then how our culture kind of emphasizes these goals that he discusses. So according to the theory, there's basically two main elements here. There's cultural goals and institutional norms, and those are kind of discussed throughout the article. So to keep the students focused while they're reading, I thought it would be a good idea to have them create a T-chart, and as they read, they can just kind of keep track of any ideas or any notes that they want to write down that have to do with the goals and the norms. After reading, students will do skits about the modes of adaptation. So this is something that they'll read in the article. There are 5 modes of adaptation according to Merton and his strain theory. And so small groups would be assigned one of the modes, and then they have to create a skit that kind of demonstrates someone who's using this mode in their life. And I had a student teacher last semester who actually did something very similar to this with my classes, and it worked really, really well, and I was really impressed, and so that's kind of where I got this idea for the skits from. The third source is called Neighborhoods and Violent Crime, a Multi-Level Study of Collective Efficacy. And there's the link to the article. Before reading, the students are going to identify the document and answer some questions about some basic key terms and what the hypothesis of the study is. And basically they're trying to figure out, is there an association between the composition of a neighborhood and the concentration of violence in the neighborhood, and if so, why do we have this association in our society? During reading, I wanted them to read this one through twice. I wanted to read it one time just to kind of get the gist of it and encourage them to underline anything that's interesting, and kind of annotate, write their questions in the margin as they read. I thought that they would be particularly interested in this one because everyone lives somewhere. Maybe you don't live in a traditional neighborhood, maybe you live in an apartment complex, but everyone can kind of relate this article back to their own life, and so I thought the students might benefit from just reading it through once, kind of no pressure, and then going back and actually paying more attention to the research process. So I wanted them to circle each step of the process and then use the words that they circled to create a heading on their paper and then kind of describe each step of the process. For after reading, this was a little bit lengthy. I wanted students to kind of do something more hands-on. So I wanted them to basically mimic the study that was done in this research study and kind of do it themselves. So not, it's not going to be extremely detailed and serious, but I wanted them to kind of practice going out and actually doing some research of their own and then trying to figure out what does the data mean and what conclusions can they draw from their data. So the next 3 these slides basically just show the surveys that they would use to collect the data, and these are pretty much the same ones that are used in the research study that they have read. So this is the first survey that measures informal social control. So they would just ask their neighbors, how likely is it that your neighbors would intervene in the following situations? And they would get people in their neighborhood to answer these questions. The next part measures social cohesion and trust. So the same idea, people in the neighborhood would either agree or disagree on this scale based on these statements. And the last part is to measure violence and personal victimization. So these are just questions and that would be asked to their neighbors. So after they complete their survey, and I asked them to ask 10 people, depending on what kind of neighborhood they live in. That may be really easy, that may be very difficult, so it's obviously just I'm gonna have to be a little bit flexible there. The whole point is I just want them to do something as an extension of their reading. So I'm not really worried about them creating some sort of, detailed professional academic research report. I do want them to look at their findings from their surveys and try to establish were they able to find a relationship between the collective efficacy and the crime rate in their own neighborhood based on the results of their survey, and then explain how that data either supports or contradicts the ideas that were presented in the original research study. So from doing the activities with these 3 articles, the whole purpose is basically just to get them to try to understand the concept of deviance within our society, to understand how certain behaviors come to be seen as deviant while others do not. And I want them to start thinking about how the structure of our society can actually influence our behavior.